It is impossible to experience change until the reason for change becomes really critical and like you have to go through it. For example, I started going to the gym recently, and this time I know it's unlike other times. Before I tried it, and I gave it a few months sometimes, and I was like, this really isn't for me. I don't see the need to go to the gym. So I went back to my previous pattern of behavior where I said, I don't need the gym, I don't need to work out. And so I was quite content to go through my life that way. It wasn't until I experienced 2 consecutive back injuries within the span of a year that I thought, okay, my body is falling apart. I need to change something in a way that I didn't do before. And so going back to the gym to help my body get stronger was the change that I had to apply myself to. I'm still not thrilled about this change. I'm still fighting it, but I'm committed to it because I want to see some change in my body. And to get to that change, I needed to experience something that was compelling. Hence, like my 2 back injuries, my knees, and so on. In the same way, for one to pursue experiencing integrity in their lives, to actually change course and say, I need this, it is something critical that needs to happen in your life that brings about that change. For some, they may call this a rock bottom. They may say, hey, what does it take for me to reach the final threshold in which I can bear no longer what I'm presently experiencing? Until that point, I don't think change is possible. So change only happens when you have hit that rock bottom. Otherwise, you still have options that you're willing to consider pursuing. And usually the right course is the hardest course that we must take, but we're averse to those difficult decisions. And so we want to try everything else that doesn't meet the bill. And the same can be said for our pursuit of integrity. It sounds nice to be one who is considered to have integrity, but you just don't get to walk into that space. You have to give something up critical. And until that happens, I don't think change, especially in the realm of pursuing and experiencing integrity, is possible. And so today I want to talk a little bit about some of those markers that I would love for you to consider to see, am I ready to change and start pursuing integrity? I'm going to share with you these patterns because I think so many of us can relate to these patterns. So many of us can say, I can see myself there. But even as I read through these patterns that you and I could probably resonate with, and we would feel like in similar company, even as we consider them, the question I'm asking is, are you at the point where you are desperately wanting to see this change, or do you feel like you can kind of coast through because you're not at that point where it's a big deal yet? So even though you and I can resonate, we can, the word I'm looking for is we can relate. That's the word I'm looking for. We can relate as we consider these patterns. We may be at different points when it comes to saying, are we at the point that we need to see change in these things? Or are we ambivalent? Are we like, I guess I can see myself there, but it's not that big of a deal yet, so I'm okay continuing to go on this present course that I'm on. Until you experience that utter sense of this has got to change, and I can't stay a day longer, I can't stay an hour, not even a moment longer in this space. Until you reach that point, change is not possible, I believe. In which case, we keep on exploring and experiencing life with contentment, with indifference perhaps. We're like, it's not a big deal. And until that point, when you are saying something's got to give, I don't think you have a really good chance of experiencing what change, especially change towards integrity, looks like. But let's dive into these patterns that I have listed here. And as I read through these, I just want to give you a brief warning. There's quite a few here that I'm going to go through. And as you listen through these, for some of you, you might find it overwhelming. You might be like, holy crap, I didn't think I was at this place where I had so much going on. And I just want to remind you, this is a process. We're going through a process. We're not trying to fix everything in one moment. That is not realistic. That is not how we're wired as human beings. The point of me going through these patterns is just a point of reflection that can help facilitate a really important point, and we talked about in yesterday's video. And that first initial point that is really important for us to begin with is acknowledgement. Saying, not only do I acknowledge, or not only do I agree that that is so, but I'm willing to say that that is so about myself. So that's a really important first place of acknowledging. But let me go through these. I have them just on my phone here because I wrote something about this on my LinkedIn profile, which you can go and read if you like to get more access to these. Here are the patterns that I have listed that you may agree with me are destructive in our experience of pursuing or trying to pursue integrity. And they go as follows. Having difficulty identifying how one feels. Finding oneself, I used yourself in the article here, but I'm going to use it in the general anonymous oneself dynamic. So having difficulty identifying how one feels, finding oneself minimizing, altering, or denying how they truly feel. Perceiving oneself as selfless and completely unselfish. Not caring for the needs or feelings of others. Disguising one's pain with humor, isolation, or anger. Expressing negativity and aggression passively and indirectly. Having difficulty making decisions. Judging one's own thoughts and contributions harshly and is never good enough. Uncomfortable in receiving recognition or praise. Valuing the approval of others. Perceiving oneself as less lovable and worthwhile. Seeking recognition and praise to mask feeling inferior. Difficulty in admitting mistakes. Needing to appear right constantly. Unable to identify or ask what one wants or needs. Perceiving oneself as superior to others. Looking to others to provide one with a sense of safety. Having trouble setting healthy priorities and boundaries in life. Remaining in harmful situations far too long because of a need to be loyal. Compromising one's own values to avoid rejection or anger. Putting aside one's interests to do what others want. Taking on and feeling responsible for the feelings of others. Feeling afraid to express one's beliefs, opinions, perspectives when they differ from others. Accepting sexual attention when you're really wanting to experience love. Making decisions without regard to the consequences. Giving up on your own truth to gain the approval of others. Believing others are incapable of helping themselves. Attempting to convince others what to think, to feel, or to do. Offering advice without being asked. Becoming resentful when others decline your help or advice. Giving gifts and favors to those you want to influence. Using sexual attention to get approval or acceptance. Having to feel needed in order to have a relationship with others. Demanding your needs to be met by others. Using charm to convince others of your ability to be compassionate. Using blame and shame to exploit others emotionally. refusing to cooperate, compromise, or negotiate, adopting indifference, helplessness, authority, or rage to manipulate outcomes, pretending to agree with others to get what you want, judging others harshly, avoiding emotional, physical, or sexual intimacy as a way to keep distance, using indirect or evasive communication to avoid conflict or confrontation, suppressing your feelings or needs to avoid feeling vulnerable, drawing others close only to push them away when they get too close, believing displays of emotion are a sign of weakness, and withholding expressions of appreciation. That was quite the list, wasn't it? How did you feel when you went through that list as you were listening to it? Did you feel exhausted at the end of it, saying, oh, like that's kind of heavy? For some of you, were you triggered? And if so, at what points were you triggered? How many of you felt relieved as you were listening to this list, saying, oh man, there's actual words to what I've been struggling with? How many of these things did you find yourself sort of doing a mental checklist and saying, yep, that's me too, and that's me? What kind of emotions were swirling around in your mind as you were listening to this list? For some, you may actually even need to rewind this video here to listen to that list again. It's quite extensive. For me, I know I had so many on that list that once upon a time I was like, oh, that's me. That's me too. And in my experience, it wasn't until I sort of was faced with this overwhelming presentation of things that I had been okay with, or I thought I'd been okay with. In fact, I was quite content living through all of these, like so many of these characteristics and patterns. Like I was going through life and I was sort of like paying the tax on all these destructive patterns of behavior without ever realizing the effect that it had on me. And I think that's what facilitated my lengthiness in my life of living in this space. I just did not know any different. And I was like, I guess this is what life is all about. But it wasn't until it was addressed and acknowledged and sort of put in front of me that I was like, oh, there it is. I see it. And that doesn't sound so great now that I think about it. And especially as I see myself doing a lot of these patterns, I was like, ah. And it wasn't until that point that I started feeling the weightiness of it, the necessity that once wasn't there. Like some would say ignorance is bliss. And when ignorance is gone, you're like, oh, now I know it. I have to do something about it because I see it. For example, at my workplace yesterday, I was getting some training from my supervisor on some things that I needed to be aware of. And so we're walking around the warehouse and he was pointing out things to me that I'd never noticed before because I just walked by them before. And all of a sudden, now that I'm having my focus directed to these areas that I'd just been oblivious to before, I was telling him I have a new set of eyes. I can see exactly like all the things that need to be attended to by way of chaos and areas that need order brought back into them. Until that point, I was just completely oblivious and I was content until my attention was brought to focus on them. And that's why I was saying in the beginning that change is impossible until you feel that weightiness that says, ugh, now that I acknowledge that I'm seeing this, I need to do something about this. I need to change this. I know it's similar when, for example, on a very familiar path that I drive to work all the time, it's not until I sit in the passenger side that I start seeing different things that I did not notice when I was driving. And now that I see those different things along the way that I'd always pass by, when I'm driving again, I have a new sense of awareness to say, oh yeah, I'm going to look for that detail over here. I'm hoping that this list of patterns was helpful for you to reflect upon, to be able to think, there's maybe a lot here that I can also address in my own personal life. And as I think about it, the question I want you to consider is, how much more can you afford by way of sustaining staying in these patterns. I mean, these are destructive patterns that get in the way of our connections and relationships in our family, with our kids, perhaps in the context of work, amongst our friends, and life in general. Like, these things continue to detract from the full enjoyment of what life could be. And especially on this channel, we are all about pursuing integrity, inspiring integrity, living in integrity, which, let me quickly define integrity. It's like living aligned with one's set of values. These are the patterns that take away from one's commitment to realigning with their value set, both internally and externally. And so the question again, I would like to ask you, my dear listener, and if you're, by the way, appreciating this content, can I just have you subscribe and follow along as I contribute more content along this way? Because my intention here is not only to increase your awareness, but also to encourage your progress towards something more of being a better version of yourself, especially one who lives with integrity. That's what I'm really aiming for. But my question again, dear listener, is how much more can you endure as far as the pain points that these patterns contribute in your life? As you were listening to these patterns, were you ambivalent, saying, I guess there's that, but I don't think that's a big deal? If that's the response, maybe there isn't any change on your radar that is necessary. And I don't think that you trying to change is going to be compelling because you're not forced to change. Remember my analogy of going to the gym before? I tried going to the gym in the past, but I didn't see the need to, so I didn't change my pattern of life. But now, after like these past experiences of pain in my life, I said, I don't want to experience that kind of debilitating physical pain. So to that end, I'm going to start attending the gym. I'm starting to commit myself to going to the gym because this is what I need for me. I need to experience this. I don't want to have this pain experience. In like manner, some of the painful experiences I've shared with you in previous videos of lessons I've learned, mistakes I've made, hearts I've broken. Oh, so many lessons I've learned. One of the ways that I was pushed to change was when I reflected on those lessons and said, I don't want to experience these lessons again. I don't want to experience what it's like to hurt someone that I care about deeply again. I don't want that on my radar. So what do I need to do now to learn how not to be in the space again of hurting people like that? For example, it's only at such a point of critical consideration that you can no longer endure the pain points that we find change to be compelling in our lives. And so if you're listening again to that, this list of patterns, and you're like, you're ambivalent, you're indifferent, you're like, I guess I see that, but it's not a big deal. The pain point isn't quite there yet, and change is most likely not on your radar. But if you're listening and saying, oh, that's me, and I don't want to experience that anymore, I think it's very hopeful that your point of change is right around the corner, if not already here. And it's an amazing gift. It's an amazing gift when you're at that point where you're like, I don't want to experience this anymore. It sounds kind of paradoxical to say that your pain point is a gift because you're like, this does not feel good, Binyam. I don't know why you're saying it's a gift. I would say it's a gift because this is the very point. This is the very moment in which you are going to move into your next spot of transition that is going to bring about that change that's necessary. This is an amazing gift. Without this critical experience of pain, you're not going to move progressively forward into change. And yes, it's uncomfortable. It's going to be very much that it's going to be asked for you as you go through this change, and change is rarely ever easy. It's actually quite challenging always. This transition you're going to be going through to becoming a better version of yourself and to be experiencing realignment internally and integrity, not going to be easy. But let me say, it's going to be good. Like the results are going to be long lasting and good. And so that's sort of the main point of this video today, is to say, how much are you able to be aware of where your pain points are? And if you're able to identify where those pain points are, gave you quite a list. Again, rewind this video and listen through again those patterns of behavior. And if you'd like, I was just reading them right from my LinkedIn page. You can search my name there and reread them for yourself. Consider, reflect on them, and find out how much more am I going to put up with this? How much more of my life am I going to waste experiencing these patterns before I get to the point of saying, I need to change. I need to see a deviation from these patterns that are not serving me well anymore. They may have served you well once upon a time, and they may have helped you survive in certain contexts, doing the best that you could. But now that you see them, and now that you know that there is another option that is healthier, that is more conducive to helping you realign internally, it isn't until that point that you can maybe consider that you're at the threshold of this beautiful gift, and that is moving through change towards your integrity. That is a pretty critical point, I think. Friends, I'm creating this content because I've come through it myself. I would love to describe my experience of where I once was, where I'm presently at, and how I got to this point. But as I do this, it's inherent that part of this process is also sharing with you what that experience was like for me, and endeavoring to inspire that it's possible for you as well. I am so driven by the yearning. It's like a deep purpose within me that I want to see you in that place where you're like, I want to walk forward, Biniam. I want to progress. I want to get to be a better version of me. And I would love to be a part of that process with you. I would love to hear how that is striking you. I want to hear some of the experiences that you're going through. I would love to hear that in the comments. I would love to hear that by you sending me a message. If you would like, I have a special email address that I've set aside, especially to hear from you. I would love to hear your story. That email is personalintegrityreset@gmail.com. personalintegrityreset@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. In time, I would love for those of you who are willing to share your story with me and with our community, with our audience. I would love to interview you about where you've been and where you're progressing and how you're progressing towards your integrity. I find that this is going to be a fantastic way of inspiring even more to consider what that looks like in their life. I'm doing this because I want to put myself forward first and say, here's who I am and where I'm from and how I got to where I'm at, especially in living with integrity. And I would love to be able to add to this community, and I'd love to inspire many more of you. And so if you want to partner with me that way, send me an email at personalintegrityreset@gmail.com. Otherwise, feel free to keep watching. Please subscribe. I would love for that, because that continues to build our momentum and our influence on this platform to inspire many more who are in this space that you and I are acknowledging that it's really important for us to live with integrity. And there are some beautiful gifts that come as a result of living with integrity. I would love for you to be a part of this community. Again, I call a lot of what I'm doing under the umbrella of what I'm saying is Operation Sawubona. Sawubona is this South African Zulu word that means I see you. And it means so much to me. Like, I resonate so strongly with this word Sawubona, or I see you, because as I share this content with you, as I share these insights, as I share this pathway and progress towards what could be in one's pursuit of integrity, I want to see you for who you truly are. Integrity comes from the Latin word integer, and that word means wholeness. And that's what I'm striving for, is to help you see yourself as whole, not as divided, not as like ripped apart in so many different directions. I would love for you to know your own wholeness according to your value set, and I want to see you in that. And so I want to be able to say to you, Sawubona, dear listener, dear viewer, Sawubona, because I see you as you've made it even to the end of yet another video. And you've made it to the end because these things that we're talking about really matter. These things are life transformative. And I want to see you as you progress into your you-ness, into your wholeness. I want to see you for what makes you you. I want to affirm that your wholeness is worthwhile and worth taking up space, that you actually matter, and that you living integrity, your integrity, is one of the most beautiful expressions that I can find in this world. There are so many things I find beautiful in this world, but one of them is when a person finds their power, finds their own self-worth, finds the reason for why they exist, and lives in it. So, sawubona, dear listener. I see you. Thank you for watching yet another video. I hope to see you on the next round. Bye for now.